The first thing that struck me was the smell, sharp metallic like the ink from freshly signed checks. It clung to the papers littering the carpet in the guest room where my brother had been staying. I bent down and picked one up. A withdrawal slip, my signature, only it wasn't mine. The words blurred as my eyes locked on the figure. $20,000. Another slip lay beneath it. This one for $35,000. My throat tightened as I gathered them into trembling hands. The room was stripped bare. The suitcase I'd seen in the corner last night was gone. Drawers gaped open, clothes missing. Even the photo frames I'd left on the dresser snapshots of us as kids at Myrtle Beach, our parents smiling in the background, were empty. Their glass fronts caught the morning light, but showed nothing behind them. On the pillow, I found the note scrawled in my brother's handwriting. The words were hurried but unmistakable. "Sorry, Jessica. Amanda says we need a fresh start. Don't look for us." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress still dented from where he'd slept. Nathan was 41 years old, yet he had vanished like a teenager sneaking out after curfew. Only he had taken more than curfew hours. He had taken nearly everything. I pressed the forged slips to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't some petty theft. It was a betrayal carved with my own name in ink I hadn't touched. From downstairs came the faint sound of footsteps, lighter and quicker than an adult's. My son Ethan was awake, and I knew in moments he would see the wreckage left behind. Mom Ethan's voice came from the doorway. Thin but steady, he stood there in his rumpled t-shirt, his hair still mussed from sleep. His eyes swept across the mess of papers in my lap and the empty drawers behind me. What happened? I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. How could I tell my 12-year-old that his uncle had stolen everything I fumbled for an answer? But Ethan stepped into the room before I could speak. He crouched beside me, studying the slips in my hands. For a moment, I braced myself for the tears, the panic. Instead, a strange calm spread across his face. He smiled. "Mom, don't worry. I handled it." I stared at him. "What do you mean, handled it?" Ethan pulled a phone from his pocket. Not his old scratched-up one, but a sleek black device I didn't recognize. With a few swipes, he showed me a profile picture from a database I had never seen before. Beneath the photo, the name read Michelle Grant. Warrants in 3 states, charges ranging from fraud to assault. "That's Amanda," Ethan said, matter-of-factly. "Your brother's girlfriend, not who she says she is." My mouth went dry. "How could you possibly? I've been watching him." Ethan interrupted, his tone disturbingly mature. He thought his late-night calls were secret. I tracked his phone. I copied his texts. Once I saw her name wasn't real, I dug deeper. Public records are public, Mom. You just have to know where to look. I gripped the edge of the bed to steady myself. My son, who still left Legos scattered across the living room floor, was talking like a private investigator. His small fingers scrolled through documents, arrest reports, addresses. He looked up at me with a certainty I couldn't quite meet. "It's all taken care of. Uncle Nathan isn't as clever as he thinks." Relief flickered through me, tangled with unease. Before I could form a response, a sharp knock echoed from the front door downstairs. The knock came again, firmer this time. I forced my legs to carry me downstairs, Ethan trailing close behind. Through the glass pane, I saw 2 officers waiting on the porch, their uniforms crisp against the gray Seattle morning. Mrs. Carter, the taller one, asked when I opened the door. His voice was professional but not unkind. "I'm Detective Thompson." "This is Officer Lopez." "May we come in?" My stomach clenched. I stepped aside, motioning them toward the living room. Ethan sank into the armchair, his small hands folded neatly in his lap. Thompson pulled a folder from under his arm and opened it on the coffee table. "We received a tip early this morning. Your brother Nathan Carter was apprehended at a gas station off Interstate 5 about 40 miles south. He was with a woman identified as Michelle Grant. The name landed like a stone." I flicked a glance at Ethan, whose expression didn't change. Lopez slid photographs across to me. Grainy surveillance images of Nathan withdrawing cash from ATMs, Michelle at his side. Bank records printed with my forged signature. Text message transcripts planning their escape. The evidence was overwhelming. I pressed my hand to my mouth. "Oh, God, I whispered the words true in their shock, if not in their surprise. Thompson softened his tone. The funds have been recovered. We'll need you to verify the withdrawals weren't authorized, but it looks like you'll get most of your money back. I nodded quickly, pretending to study the papers while my mind spun. The tip they spoke of it wasn't anonymous at all. It was Ethan. My 12-year-old had fed the authorities everything they needed. I forced my voice steady. I didn't know he was capable of this. I never imagined. We understand, Thompson said, closing the folder. Someone was looking out for you. Ethan shifted slightly in his chair, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. Before I could react, the phone on the end table rang its shrill tone, slicing through the silence. The phone's shrill ring had barely faded when I picked it up, my hand shaking. Hello! A rush of static, then Nathan's voice raw and desperate. Jessica, it's me. Don't hang up, please. I swallowed hard. Where are you, County Jail? They got us, Michelle and me. But listen, this wasn't random. Someone set me up. Someone close. They knew everything. Our route, the withdrawals, even the burner phone. Who else could have known that? Who? I closed my eyes, staring at the folder of evidence still lying on the coffee table. My son sat a few feet away, quiet as a shadow, his gaze fixed on me. Nathan, I managed. You made your choices. You signed my name. You stole from me. I was going to pay it back, he said quickly, words tripping over themselves. She told me it was an investment, a chance to finally fix everything. But someone wanted me to fail. Michelle's dangerous, but it's bigger than her. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to demand details to ask him what exactly he meant. But Ethan shifted in the chair, tilting his head slightly, watching me. I don't know anything, I said at last, my voice thin but firm. You'll have to deal with the consequences. A long pause, then the sound of him exhaling hard. You don't get it. They're playing a game with me with us. Be careful. The line went dead. I lowered the receiver slowly, my palm damp with sweat. The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Ethan leaned back, crossing one leg over the other in a gesture far too adult. Maybe she betrayed him, he said almost lightly. Criminals eat their own. The simplicity of the suggestion should have comforted me, but instead it rooted itself deep inside my chest, cold and heavy as the afternoon light shifted across the floorboards. That evening, after the police had gone and the house felt too quiet, I found Ethan at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of him. His pen moved steadily across the page, his brows knit in concentration. He didn't notice me lingering in the doorway. Homework, I asked, trying to sound casual. He shook his head without looking up. A letter for Uncle Nathan. I think it might help him. I wanted to tell him not to bother, that Nathan didn't deserve a single word, but Ethan's tone was calm, purposeful. I left him to it, though. Unease prickled along my skin. Later, when he'd gone upstairs, I found the letter on the counter neatly folded with Uncle, written across the front. My better judgment told me to leave it alone, but my hands moved on their own. I unfolded the page and began to read. The handwriting was careful, almost adult, and the words cut sharper than I expected. Dear Uncle Nathan, I forgive you for stealing from us. I forgive you for choosing a criminal over your family. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Prison has rules. You never liked rules, but maybe they'll finally teach you. You belong there because out here, you only hurt the people who care about you. I felt my chest tighten. The next lines chilled me even more. If you ever try to come back and hurt Mom or Grandma again, if you even think about taking from us, I'll finish what you started. You tied your own noose when you forged her name. I'll just make sure it holds. I lowered the letter, my hands trembling. The words weren't written by a 12-year-old boy. They were crafted by someone who understood how to wound, how to dominate. Forgiveness cloaked in threat. Mercy sharpened into a blade. Awe and terror wrestled inside me. This was my son, my sweet boy who still asked for an extra blanket at night. Yet here he was, shaping sentences like a man who had studied cruelty. I refolded the paper, slid it back where I found it, and pressed my palms against the counter to steady myself. Upstairs, I heard Ethan's door close, and in the silence that followed the knock at the front door, returned heavier than before. The pounding at the door came just as I was slipping Ethan's letter back onto the counter. I startled, clutching the edge of the sink to steady myself. When I opened the door, a woman in a navy blazer introduced herself with brisk efficiency. "Sarah Mitchell, Child Protective Services." "May I come in?" My throat went dry. Of course I managed stepping aside. She carried a clipboard, her smile professional but sharp. "We received a report expressing concerns about your son's well-being. With your brother's recent arrest, it's routine we follow up." I glanced at Ethan, who had appeared at the top of the stairs. He came down slowly, polite as ever, and offered his hand with a composure that made him look years older. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Sarah seemed impressed. Polite, too. "That's nice to see." She asked to see his room. I braced myself, but Ethan opened the door with a flourish. Everything was immaculate bed, made books stacked by subject, clothes folded in drawers. His laptop sat closed on the desk, a row of sharpened pencils beside it. Sarah made notes, nodding. "Spotless. You should be proud, Mrs. Carter." Ethan answered her questions with practiced ease about school friends, how he was coping with his uncle's arrest. He spoke with balance, never defensive, never rehearsed, just enough detail to sound natural. "Sometimes I feel sad," he admitted softly. "But Mom always makes sure I'm okay." Sarah's face softened. "That's a very healthy way of putting it." By the time she finished, she was practically glowing. "Your son is one of the most well-adjusted children I've met in these circumstances. I'll file a positive report. Likely no further follow-up will be needed." I forced a smile, thanked her, and saw her out. The moment the door closed, Ethan turned to me with a small, satisfied grin. "Easy," he said, heading toward the kitchen as though nothing had happened. I stood frozen in the hallway, heart thudding, the echo of Sarah's praise still ringing in my ears. Outside, the world saw perfection. Inside, I could feel suspicion rooting deeper, and it only grew stronger when the phone rang again, flashing the county jail's number across the screen. The phone rang just after midnight, its shrill tone slicing through the silence of the house. I fumbled for it on the nightstand, and a clipped voice on the other end told me my brother had been rushed from the jail to the hospital. When I arrived, the fluorescent lights seemed harsher than usual, humming above the sterile hallway. A nurse led me to his room. Nathan lay on the bed, his skin pale, the bruises on his neck dark and raw. For a moment, I saw only the boy he once was, reckless, but laughing, always pulling me into trouble. And then the man who had emptied my accounts came rushing back. His eyelids fluttered open. "Jessica," he rasped, every word scraping his throat. "You have to listen. Watch your boy." I gripped the rail of his bed, trying to steady myself. "You're weak. You need to rest." "No," he whispered fiercely. "Ethan, he knew everything before I even acted. He knew." Michelle said he gave her chills, like he could see through her. The door creaked, and our mother Evelyn hurried in. She clutched her handbag against her chest like armor, her eyes already glistening with tears. She went straight to Nathan's side, smoothing his hair with shaking hands. "Don't start with that," she said sharply. "You betrayed us, Nathan. Don't drag Ethan into your guilt. He's a good boy, the only good thing left." Nathan's gaze locked on mine, desperate and pleading. "Please, just watch him." I gave a small nod, though my throat felt tight with words I couldn't speak. Evelyn tugged gently at my arm. "Let's go. He needs sleep, not more lies." We stepped out into the night air, but Nathan's voice clung to me, faint and broken. "Watch your boy." It echoed all the way home, louder than the hum of the tires on the empty road, and it followed me as I unlocked the front door, where the house was waiting in silence. By the time we returned home from the hospital, the house was silent, but my nerves were raw. I hadn't even taken off my coat when the phone rang again. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me knew before I answered. "Jessica," a woman's voice hissed, sharp and venomous. "It's Michelle. Or should I say, Michelle Grant. You think you're clever, don't you? I know who tipped the police. It wasn't luck. And if you don't want me telling your brother the truth, you'd better." The phone was plucked from my hand before she could finish. Ethan, suddenly at my side, pressed the receiver to his ear. His voice was steady, almost amused. If you really knew anything, you wouldn't be calling from a burner in the middle of the night. You'd be running, which, by the way, you should be." There was a pause on the other end, then a muffled curse before the line went dead. Ethan handed the phone back, his expression smooth. "She's bluffing, Mom. Scammers always try to scare you. It's what they do best." I nodded, though my pulse still raced. "How did you know it was her?" He shrugged lightly. Too lightly. "Who else would call?" "Don't worry, she's got nothing." But for the briefest moment just before the mask slid back into place, I caught it. Something flickering in his eyes. Panic. Not long, not loud, just a flash like lightning behind a storm. Then it was gone, replaced with the calm confidence he always wore. "See?" Ethan smiled, already moving toward the kitchen. Handled. I stood frozen in the hallway, phone heavy in my hand, the silence pressing in. Upstairs, the floor creaked as he climbed the steps, and I realized I wasn't sure if the sound comforted me or made the walls feel thinner. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I wandered into the kitchen, restless, unable to shake Michelle's voice from my mind. On the counter sat Ethan's notebook, half buried under a stack of mail. I pulled it free, meaning only to tidy, but the page fell open on its own. It wasn't homework. It was a chessboard drawn in neat squares, each piece carefully sketched. The pawns had been advanced across the board, every one of them promoted into queens. The king cornered had no escape. A chill worked through me. "Find something interesting." Ethan's voice came from the doorway. He strolled in bare feet, silent on the tile, his expression unreadable. I held the notebook up. "What is this?" He tilted his head, studying me. "It's strategy, Mom. Endgame positions. Pawns aren't weak if they keep moving forward." His eyes glinted. "Family is what you protect, not what you forgive." I set the notebook down, forcing my voice steady. "Ethan, you're 12. You're not supposed to carry the weight of everyone's sins on your shoulders. You need to talk to someone, a counselor. There have to be limits." For the first time, his mask faltered just slightly. He looked at me, something hard flickering beneath the surface, and then he smiled with practiced ease. "If that's what you want, sure, I'll go. I'll say all the right things." "That's not what I meant," I said quickly. "I want you to be honest, to feel like a kid again." His smile lingered, but his words cut through me like glass. "I can do that, Mom, as long as no one threatens us again." The casual tone made my chest tighten because I knew it wasn't a promise. It was a condition. I gathered the notebook and slid it into a drawer, my hands trembling while Ethan poured himself a glass of milk as if nothing had been said. The sound of the front door opening broke the silence, and my mother's weary voice carried down the hallway. The next morning, the smell of pancakes drifted through the house. I padded into the kitchen to find Ethan at the stove, flipping golden circles onto a plate, while my mother sat at the table beaming as though nothing in our world had cracked. He looked every bit the boy he was supposed to be, bare feet, messy hair, humming off key. "Good morning, Mom," he said, sliding a plate toward me. "Coffee's ready, too." I forced a smile, but the night before pressed heavy in my chest. At dawn, the hospital had called. Nathan wanted me to come. His voice was broken, pleading. "Tell the truth about Ethan." He begged, "Please, Jessica, before it's too late." I sat at his bedside, hearing the same desperate refrain he had whispered before. But as I looked at him, defeated, chained by his own choices, I realized that exposing Ethan would not save him. It would only tear apart what little remained of our family. Back home, I carried Ethan's letter upstairs and slid it into the fireproof safe where we kept birth certificates and insurance papers. I turned the key slowly, the click of the lock sounding final. The letter would stay hidden just like the truth. When I returned to the kitchen, Ethan was already seated passing syrup to Grandma with a polite grin. His eyes flicked to mine, steady and unreadable, and then he smiled, wide, innocent, the picture of any 12-year-old boy. I sat down across from him, the taste of pancakes turning to ash in my mouth, and told myself silence was protection, even as I wondered what game my son might be playing next. Jessica sat alone in the dim kitchen, the silence heavy after days of chaos. Ethan's chessboard lingered in her mind. Pawns turned queens, the king trapped. She'd always taught him to protect family, but his actions revealed a truth she hadn't faced. Protection could twist into control, loyalty into something sharper. Nathan's betrayal cut deep, but Ethan's calculated response, his ability to outmaneuver adults, unsettled her more. She'd underestimated her son, mistaking his youth for innocence. The lesson was clear. Love doesn't blind you to flaws. It demands you see them clearly. Jessica realized she needed to guide Ethan, not just shield him, to set boundaries before his cunning outgrew his heart. She couldn't undo Nathan's choices or erase the letter locked in the safe, but she could choose to watch her son closely, to teach him that strength lies in compassion, not domination. As dawn broke, she vowed to help Ethan navigate his instincts to keep the boy who made pancakes from becoming a stranger. Silence wasn't protection, it was a pause. The real work began now.
Growing up in the Martinez household meant understanding the hierarchy from an early age. Elena, my older sister by 4 years, was destined to be the family success story: pre-med at Northwestern, acceptance to medical school, residency at Mayo Clinic, and now a thriving orthopedic surgery practice in downtown Seattle. I was the creative one, which in our family was code for the one who'll probably struggle financially forever. Music isn't a career, Mija, Mom would say whenever I talked about my dreams of working in the industry. It's a hobby. Elena is going to save lives. What are you going to do, play guitar on street corners? The comments stung, but they weren't entirely unfair. By the time I turned 30, my music career looked exactly like what my family had predicted. A series of small gigs, session work that barely paid rent, and a collection of songs I'd written that no one seemed interested in hearing. I lived in a cramped apartment in East Nashville, sharing space with 2 roommates and surviving on a diet that consisted primarily of ramen and whatever free food I could find at music industry events. Elena, meanwhile, had everything our parents had dreamed of for their daughters. She owned a beautiful home in an upscale Seattle neighborhood, drove a BMW, and could afford to take vacations to Europe whenever she felt like it. More importantly, she had the respect and admiration of our entire extended family. Dr. Martinez, they called her at family gatherings, always emphasizing the title. I was just Sophia, or more often, Elena's sister who's still trying to make it in music. The pattern was established early and reinforced constantly. Elena's achievements were celebrated with family dinners and Facebook posts that garnered hundreds of likes from relatives. My small victories, landing a session gig with a touring band, having one of my songs featured on a local radio station, getting hired to write jingles for a small advertising agency, were met with polite smiles and immediate redirections to more important topics. "That's nice, honey," Mom would say when I shared good news about my work. Elena just published another research paper in the Journal of Orthopedic Surgery. Did you see the article about her in the hospital newsletter? It wasn't that my family was deliberately cruel. They loved me in their way. But they'd decided long ago that Elena was the daughter who would bring honor to the family name, while I was the one they'd have to support emotionally and sometimes financially, through a series of artistic disappointments. The breaking point came when Elena announced her engagement to Robert Chin, a successful cardiologist she'd met during her residency. The wedding planning became a year-long celebration of everything Elena had achieved: her career, her financial stability, her ability to attract an equally successful partner. "We're thinking about a destination wedding," Elena told us during one of our monthly family dinners. "Maybe somewhere in Italy. Robert's family has connections there." Dad nearly choked on his wine. "Italy? Elena, that's going to be expensive." "We can afford it," she said with a shrug that somehow managed to be both casual and smug. "Between my practice and Robert's salary, money isn't really an issue." The implication was clear. Unlike some people in the family, Elena had made responsible choices that led to financial security. I kept eating my enchiladas and tried to ignore the familiar sting of comparison. The wedding planning consumed our family's conversations for months. Every dinner became a discussion of venue options, catering menus, guest lists, and flower arrangements. Elena basked in the attention, holding court like a benevolent queen, dispensing updates about her perfect life to her grateful subjects. "Sophia should sing at the ceremony," Mom suggested during one of these planning sessions. "She has such a beautiful voice." Elena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of micro-expression that siblings learn to read after decades of practice. That's sweet, Mom, but we're hiring professional musicians. This isn't really the right venue for, well, you know. The sentence hung unfinished, but everyone understood what she meant. My amateur music wasn't appropriate for her sophisticated wedding to her successful doctor fiancé. I could write something special, I offered, immediately regretting the desperation in my voice. Maybe something just for the reception? We've already hired a band, Elena said firmly. But thank you for offering. The rejection shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. This was my sister, the person who used to sneak into my room to hear me practice guitar when we were kids, who'd once told me I was the most talented person she knew. Success had changed her, or maybe it had just revealed who she'd always been underneath the childhood affection. 3 months before the wedding, I got a call that would change everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. Sophia Martinez? The voice was professional, crisp, with a slight British accent. Speaking. This is James Worthington from Atlantic Records. I'm a senior A&R representative, and I've been listening to some demos that came across my desk. Your name was on several of them as a songwriter and producer. My heart stopped. Atlantic Records was calling me? Yes, I've done some writing and production work. Quite impressive work, actually. We're looking for someone with your particular style to work on a project with one of our major artists. The timeline is aggressive. We'd need you in the studio starting next week, but the compensation would be substantial. The next 20 minutes felt like a dream. James explained that they needed someone to produce and co-write songs for an album by Maya Chin, a pop artist whose last 2 records had gone platinum. Maya had specifically requested someone whose work she'd heard on some indie tracks, and my name had come up repeatedly in industry circles as an emerging talent. The thing is, James said, this would be a significant time commitment. We're talking about potentially 6 months of intensive work, including some travel for recording sessions. The artist is quite particular about maintaining creative momentum once she starts a project. I can do that, I said immediately. Excellent. We'll start with a 3-song trial. If those work out well, we'll discuss a full album deal. The compensation for the trial period alone would be $150,000, with substantial bonuses if the songs perform well commercially. After hanging up, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the walls covered with musical equipment and half-finished song lyrics. $150,000 was more than I'd made in the previous 3 years combined. But more than the money, this was the opportunity I'd been working toward for over a decade. The next 6 months were the most intense of my life. Maya Chin turned out to be not just talented but genuinely collaborative, interested in pushing boundaries and creating something meaningful rather than just commercially viable. We worked 12-hour days in state-of-the-art studios, bringing in session musicians I'd only dreamed of working with, crafting songs that felt both innovative and accessible. You have an ear for this, Maya told me during one late-night session. Most producers try to impose their vision on my voice. You're helping me find sounds I didn't know I was capable of. The album, titled Metamorphosis, was unlike anything Maya had done before and unlike anything I'd done before. It was bold, experimental, deeply personal, and somehow completely infectious. When we finished the final track, both of us knew we'd created something special. But the music industry moves slowly, and I was sworn to secrecy about the project until the official announcements were made. 4 months, I went back to my regular life. Session work, small gigs, family dinners where Elena dominated conversations about her wedding plans, while sitting on the biggest secret of my career. Are you even working these days? Elena asked during one family dinner, 2 months before her wedding. You seem to have a lot of free time lately. I've been in the studio quite a bit, I said, which was technically true. Still doing those little demos? She asked with the tone she might use to discuss a child's art project. That's nice. Keeps you busy. The condescension was nothing new, but it felt different now. I was carrying knowledge that would fundamentally change how my family saw me, but I couldn't share it yet. Instead, I had to sit there and absorb Elena's subtle put-downs while counting down the days until the album release. Elena's wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in June at an expensive venue overlooking Elliott Bay. She'd managed to pull together the kind of elegant affair that would be talked about in family circles for years: perfectly coordinated flowers, a string quartet, a 7-course dinner that probably cost more than my annual rent. I arrived at the reception wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, something that looked expensive enough to fit in with Elena's crowd but hadn't actually broken my budget. The guest list was exactly what I'd expected. Successful doctors, lawyers, business executives, and their equally successful spouses. I was seated at a table with some distant cousins and family friends, far from the head table where Elena and Robert held court. The reception followed the predictable script. Toasts praising Elena's achievements, stories about her dedication to her medical career, congratulations on finding such a perfect match in Robert. Everyone spoke about her success, her intelligence, her bright future. I smiled and applauded at the appropriate moments while mentally preparing myself for the inevitable moment when someone would ask about my own career prospects. That moment came during the cocktail hour, when Elena decided to introduce me to some of Robert's colleagues from the hospital. "This is my sister Sophia," she said, her arm around my shoulders in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt performative. "She's our family's creative spirit." "What kind of work do you do?" asked Dr. Anderson, Robert's department head, with the polite interest that successful people show when they're trying to be gracious to someone they assume is less accomplished. Before I could answer, Elena jumped in with a laugh that was meant to sound fond but came out slightly mocking. "Sophia's been trying to make it in the music industry for years. She writes songs, does some studio work. Very artistic. Failed art career," she announced to the small group that had gathered around us, her voice carrying that particular tone that siblings use when they're sharing an embarrassing family story. "She's been struggling for years," she laughed, looking around the group for validation of her assessment. The words hit me like a physical blow, made worse by the setting in the audience. These were Elena's colleagues, people who represented the kind of success our family valued, and she was presenting me as the cautionary tale, the sister who'd made poor life choices and was paying the predictable price. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I'd had years of practice at managing these situations. "Art is tough," I said quietly, giving Elena the response she expected, the acknowledgement of failure that would allow the conversation to move on to more comfortable topics. But as the group prepared to shift their attention back to Elena's achievements and wedding plans, my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost ignored it. This was Elena's moment, and I wasn't going to be the person who answered a call during her wedding reception. But something made me glance at the screen, and I saw a number I didn't recognize with a Los Angeles area code. For reasons I still can't explain, I decided to answer it. "Sophia Martinez?" The voice was excited, professional, crackling with energy. "Yes, this is Sophia. This is Patricia Williams from the Recording Academy. I'm calling with some fantastic news. Congratulations, you've been nominated for a Grammy Award for Producer of the Year for your work on Maya Chen's Metamorphosis album." The world stopped. The conversation around me, Elena's laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, the string quartet playing in the background, all faded into white noise. I was vaguely aware that the group was still standing there, waiting for me to finish my call so they could continue discussing Elena's medical career. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" I managed to say. "You've been nominated for Producer of the Year. The album has been nominated in 4 categories total: Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal Album, Producer of the Year for You, and Song of the Year for Invisible Threads, which you co-wrote. The nominations will be announced publicly tomorrow morning, but we always call nominees first to give them a heads up." I looked up and saw Elena staring at me with growing irritation. Her wedding reception was not the appropriate place for me to take phone calls, especially not calls that were drawing attention away from her and her accomplishments. "The Grammy Awards ceremony is in February," Patricia continued. "You'll be receiving an official invitation, and of course we'll want to arrange interviews with the music press. This is a tremendous honor, especially for someone so early in their producing career. Maya Chen specifically requested that we reach out to you first. She wanted to make sure you knew how much this nomination means to the entire team." "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is incredible. Congratulations again, Sophia. We'll be in touch soon with more details." I hung up the phone and looked at the group of people still standing around me: Elena, Robert, Dr. Anderson, and several other medical professionals who'd been prepared to offer polite condolences about my failed artistic ambitions. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Elena's smile had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of confusion and growing alarm. "What was that about?" she asked, her voice tight with control. "I've been nominated for a Grammy Award," I said, the words feeling surreal as they came out of my mouth. For Producer of the Year. Dr. Anderson's eyebrows shot up. A Grammy? As in the Grammy Awards? Yes. For an album I produced with Maya Chin. It's also nominated for Album of the Year. The group exchanged glances, trying to process this information. Elena looked like someone had just told her that gravity was no longer applicable in this particular location. Maya Chin? Robert asked. The pop singer? Her new album. Metamorphosis, I confirmed. We worked on it for 6 months. It went platinum last month. Elena's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. You never said you were working with Maya Chin. I was under a non-disclosure agreement until the album was released. I couldn't talk about it. But you've been. We thought you were. Elena struggled to find words that wouldn't sound as condescending as her earlier assessment of my career. You've been doing session work and small gigs. I've been doing a lot of things, I said. Including producing one of the biggest albums of the year, apparently. Dr. Anderson was the first to recover from the shock. This is extraordinary. Grammy nominations are incredibly prestigious. Do you mind me asking, what does something like this mean for your career? It was a question I was still trying to answer myself. It means I'll probably have more opportunities to work with major artists. The financial compensation for this project alone has been substantial. Elena looked like she was going to be sick. The sister she just described as a failure to her husband's colleagues had apparently been secretly achieving the kind of success that most people can only dream about. How substantial? Robert asked, with the bluntness of someone accustomed to discussing money professionally. I hesitated. The numbers were almost embarrassing to say out loud, especially in contrast to how my family had perceived my financial situation. The producer fee for this album was $2.8 million. Plus royalties that should continue for years. The champagne glass in Elena's hand started to shake. $2.8 million? Dr. Anderson repeated. For one album? It's been #1 for 8 weeks, I explained. Maya's previous albums were very successful, so the label was willing to pay for the right producer. Apparently, I was the right producer. Elena set down her champagne glass carefully, as if she was afraid she might drop it. The group around us had grown larger. Other wedding guests had noticed the intense conversation and were drifting over to see what was happening. Grammy nomination, Elena repeated slowly as if she was trying to make the words make sense. You're nominated for a Grammy. Producer of the Year, I confirmed. Along with some of the biggest names in the industry. Mom appeared at my elbow, having noticed the commotion. What's everyone talking about? Sophia, who was on the phone. Before I could answer, Dr. Anderson jumped in with obvious excitement. Your daughter has been nominated for a Grammy Award. She produced Maya Chen's new album. Mom's face went through the same progression of expressions I'd seen on Elena's face moments earlier. Confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning realization. A Grammy? She asked weakly. For nominations, actually, I clarified. The album is up for Album of the Year too. The crowd around us was growing larger, and I could see Dad pushing through the other guests to find out what was causing such a stir at his daughter's wedding reception. Elena stood frozen in the center of it all, watching her carefully orchestrated celebration transform into something else entirely. This was supposed to be her day, her moment to shine in front of everyone who mattered to her, and instead everyone was talking about her sister's secret success. 4 Grammy nominations, someone repeated in an odd voice. Maya Chin, someone else added. That album is incredible. Did you know about this? Dad asked Mom, who shook her head in amazement. We had no idea, Mom said. We thought she was still doing small studio work. Elena finally found her voice again. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, and for the first time all evening she sounded less like the condescending older sister and more like someone who was genuinely hurt by being excluded from something so important. I couldn't, I said. Non-disclosure agreements are standard in the industry, especially for high-profile projects. I wasn't allowed to discuss any details until after the album was released and the label decided to submit it for Grammy consideration. But this is huge, Robert said, looking back and forth between Elena and me as if he was seeing our family dynamic for the first time. This is career-defining success. Elena's face was pale now, and I realized that she was processing more than just the surprise of my nomination. She was remembering years of condescending comments, dismissive remarks about my career, and most recently her announcement to this very group of people that I had a failed art career. "Elena," I said quietly, "I'm sorry this happened at your wedding. I didn't know they were going to call today." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with emotions that were far more complex than simple surprise or even embarrassment. "No," she said finally, "I'm the one who should apologize. What I said earlier about your career. I had no idea." The admission hung in the air between us, witnessed by her husband's colleagues and our parents and a growing crowd of wedding guests who were all trying to understand how the family failure had secretly become the family's biggest success story. "It's okay," I said. "You couldn't have known." "But I should have supported you," Elena said, her voice getting stronger. "Even if I didn't understand what you were doing, even if it looked like you were struggling, I should have been encouraging instead of what I was." The crowd around us had grown to include most of the wedding reception, and I realized that Elena's moment of public acknowledgement was happening in front of everyone she'd wanted to impress with her own achievements. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert said, raising his champagne glass and speaking loudly enough for the entire reception to hear, "I think we need to add another toast to tonight's celebration. To Sophia Martinez, Grammy nominee and apparently secret musical genius." The room erupted in applause and cheers, and I found myself accepting congratulations from dozens of people who an hour earlier had probably seen me as Elena's less successful sister. Elena stood beside me through it all, smiling and accepting congratulations on my behalf, but I could see the complexity of emotions playing across her face. Pride certainly, and genuine happiness for my success, but also something that looked like grief, perhaps for the sister relationship we might have had if she hadn't spent so many years convinced that my dreams were foolish. Later, after the reception had ended and the guest had gone home, Elena and I found ourselves alone on the venue's terrace overlooking the water. "I owe you more than just an apology," she said, still wearing her wedding dress but having kicked off the expensive shoes that had been pinching her feet all evening. "Elena, you don't." "Yes, I do." She turned to face me and I could see tears in her eyes. "I've been a terrible sister. For years I've been so focused on proving that I made the right choices, the responsible choices, that I completely dismissed your dreams. Worse than dismissed them, I mocked them." "You were protecting me in your way," I said. "You didn't want me to get hurt by chasing something unrealistic." "No," she said firmly. "I was protecting myself. I was so invested in being the successful one, the one who had it all figured out, that I needed you to be the one who was struggling. It made me feel better about my own choices." The honesty was painful but necessary. We'd both known the dynamic existed, but neither of us had ever acknowledged it so directly. "Your success doesn't diminish mine," I said. "You're an amazing doctor. You save people's lives. That matters." "And your success doesn't diminish mine either," she replied. But I acted like it would. I acted like there was only room for one successful daughter in this family, and I'd already claimed that spot. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the water and processing the events of the evening. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said eventually. "Of course. When you were sitting there earlier listening to me tell everyone about your failed art career, and you knew you'd just been nominated for a Grammy, how did you not punch me in the face?" I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had all evening. "I thought about it. I would have deserved it. Maybe. But I've learned that success is its own revenge. I didn't need to defend myself because I knew that reality would speak louder than anything I could say." Elena nodded thoughtfully. Reality certainly spoke tonight. The Grammy Awards ceremony 4 months later was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I didn't win Producer of the Year. That honor went to a veteran producer whose body of work spanned decades. But Metamorphosis won Album of the Year, and Maya Chin thanked me specifically in her acceptance speech. "To Sophia Martinez," she said, holding the Grammy up to the audience, "who heard sounds in my voice that I didn't know existed and helped me create something I'm genuinely proud of." Elena was in the audience that night, having flown to Los Angeles specifically to support me. When the camera panned to my table during Maya's speech, you could see her in the background, crying and applauding with genuine pride and excitement. After the ceremony at one of the many after-parties, Elena pulled me aside. I have something to tell you, she said. I've been thinking a lot about what happened at my wedding, about how I treated you over the years, and I want to make some changes. Elena, we've talked about this. We're good. Let me finish, she said. I'm thinking about taking a sabbatical from my practice. Maybe a year off to do some volunteer medical work overseas, or to explore some research opportunities I've been ignoring because they weren't as financially lucrative. That sounds amazing. But what brought this on? Watching you tonight, seeing how happy you are doing work that you love, work that matters to you. It made me realize that I've been so focused on building a successful career that I forgot to think about whether it was actually fulfilling. She paused, looking around at the party full of musicians, producers, and industry professionals who were celebrating their passion for creating art. I became a doctor because it was prestigious and financially secure. And I'm good at it, and I do help people. But I don't love it the way you love music. I don't wake up excited about what I'm going to create that day. There's nothing wrong with choosing security, I said. Not everyone needs to be an artist. Maybe not. But everyone should have the chance to pursue what makes them feel alive. And I spent so many years convincing you that wasn't practical or realistic, when really I was just jealous that you had the courage to try. Elena did take that sabbatical, spending 8 months doing medical work in Central America and then returning to Seattle to start a nonprofit clinic focused on providing healthcare to underserved communities. She makes less money now, but when we talk on the phone she sounds happier than she has in years. As for me, the Grammy nomination opened doors I'd never imagined. I've produced albums for artists across multiple genres, won several industry awards, and built a recording studio in Nashville that's become known for its innovative approach to sound design. But the moment that mattered most wasn't winning any award or achieving any particular milestone. It was standing on that terrace with Elena after her wedding, both of us finally honest about who we'd been to each other and who we wanted to be going forward. Success isn't just about achieving your dreams. Sometimes it's about proving that your dreams were worth pursuing in the first place, even when everyone around you thought they were impossible. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it's about inspiring the people you love to pursue their own version of those dreams, even if it means admitting they were wrong about yours. The Christmas gathering at Mom and Dad's house in Westchester had been carefully orchestrated to showcase what Dad called the family's upward trajectory. Everything from the imported wine to the catered dinner reflected his obsession with projecting success. Dad sat at the head of the mahogany dining table wearing a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, discussing his latest investment portfolio achievements with anyone willing to listen. The diversification strategy has been absolutely brilliant, Dad announced, swirling his $300 bottle of Bordeaux. My wealth management team at Goldman suggested reallocating 30% of our holdings into emerging markets, and the returns have exceeded every projection. Uncle Richard nodded approvingly from his position to Dad's right. What kind of annual yield are you seeing on the international funds? Consistent 12 to 15%, Dad replied with obvious satisfaction. The portfolio managers say they've rarely seen such sustained growth across multiple sectors simultaneously. He gestured grandly around the dining room, which had been recently renovated with marble countertops, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. This lifestyle doesn't happen by accident, Dad continued. It requires sophisticated financial planning, strategic risk assessment, and the discipline to make intelligent long-term investment decisions. Mom beamed with pride from her seat beside him. Harold's investment portfolio has grown by over 200% in just the past 3 years. 240% actually, Dad corrected with a modest smile. The wealth advisors at Meridian Elite Capital have been absolutely phenomenal. They've constructed a portfolio that generates substantial passive income while maintaining aggressive growth potential. Cousin Michael leaned forward with genuine interest. Meridian Elite Capital? I've heard they only work with ultra-high net worth clients. Exactly, Dad nodded. Minimum investment threshold is $10 million. They don't waste time with small accounts or unsophisticated investors. He pulled out his phone and opened what appeared to be a financial app, displaying impressive charts and numbers to anyone close enough to see. Current portfolio value is sitting at approximately $75 million, generating roughly $850,000 in annual passive income. That's before capital gains, of course. The numbers drew impressed murmurs from around the table. I sat quietly at the far corner, Still wearing the cheap blazer I'd bought at a discount store because I couldn't afford anything nicer on my $42,000 annual salary as a community college adjunct professor. The key is understanding market dynamics, Dad explained, clearly enjoying his role as the family's financial expert. Most people make emotional investment decisions based on fear or greed. Sophisticated investors like myself work with professional wealth managers who understand global economic trends. Aunt Susan looked genuinely amazed. $75 million. Harold, I had no idea your portfolio had grown so substantially. Conservative estimate, actually, Dad replied casually. The real estate holdings alone are worth probably another 20 to 25 million, but I don't count those as liquid investments. He gestured around the house with obvious pride. This property has appreciated nearly 40% since we purchased it 5 years ago. The wealth advisors suggested we could leverage the equity for additional investment opportunities, but we're already generating more passive income than we can reasonably spend. Brother-in-law Tom whistled appreciatively. What kind of investment vehicles are producing those returns? Dad launched into detailed explanations of hedge fund allocations, international bond portfolios, private equity partnerships, and something called alternative investment strategies that apparently only ultra-wealthy individuals could access. The private wealth management team handles all the complex analysis, Dad explained. They provide quarterly reports breaking down performance metrics, risk assessments, and optimization recommendations. It's incredibly sophisticated. He showed his phone to several family members, displaying what appeared to be professional portfolio statements with impressive graphs and projections. The beauty of working with Meridian Elite Capital is that they handle everything: asset allocation, tax optimization, estate planning integration, even concierge services for major purchases. Mom nodded enthusiastically. They helped us negotiate the terms for this house renovation. Apparently having a $75 million portfolio gives you access to exclusive contractor networks and bulk purchasing agreements. Everything becomes easier when you have serious money, Dad agreed. The investment advisors can arrange financing for virtually anything: vacation homes, luxury vehicles, art collections, even business acquisitions. He turned his attention to me for the first time all evening, his expression mixing pity with mild embarrassment. David, you should really consider letting me introduce you to some basic financial planning concepts. I know your professor's salary doesn't leave much room for investments, but even small amounts can grow over time with proper management. I'm doing okay with my budget, I replied quietly. Dad chuckled condescendingly. Son, I'm talking about real wealth building. Your community college teaching position might seem adequate for day-to-day expenses, but it's not a strategy for long-term financial security. Harold's right, Uncle Richard chimed in. Academic salaries are notoriously limited. You need to think about diversifying your income streams. Dad nodded sagely. The problem with academic careers is that they're essentially charity work disguised as employment. You're trading potential wealth for the satisfaction of helping people, which is admirable but not practical. He gestured around the elegant dining room. This lifestyle requires serious money, David. Investment portfolios, passive income generation, strategic wealth accumulation. Things that are simply impossible on a professor's salary. I understand, I said calmly. Do you though? Dad pressed. Because I sometimes worry that you don't fully grasp the financial realities of adult life. He pulled up another screen on his phone, showing what appeared to be expense calculations. This dinner tonight cost approximately $800 for ingredients and catering. The wine we're drinking retails for $300 per bottle. The flowers on the table were $150. The renovation on this dining room was $85,000. Dad looked directly at me with what he probably thought was fatherly concern. David, that's more than twice your annual salary just for this one room. You're living in a completely different economic universe from the rest of this family. Mom touched Dad's arm gently. Harold, maybe we shouldn't focus on money during Christmas dinner. Actually, Christmas is the perfect time to discuss financial realities, Dad replied. David needs to understand that his lifestyle choices have consequences. He chose academic work over wealth building, and this is the result. He gestured between himself and me, highlighting the obvious contrast. I'm wearing a suit that cost $3,500. David's jacket probably came from a discount store. I drive a car worth more than his annual salary. I own investment properties worth more than he'll earn in his entire career. The room fell uncomfortably silent. Several family members looked embarrassed by Dad's bluntness. The point isn't to make David feel bad, Dad continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. The point is to illustrate the power of intelligent financial decision-making. He returned to his portfolio display, clearly proud of the numbers. Meridian Elite Capital's wealth managers project continued growth of 8 to 12% annually. At that rate, my portfolio should reach approximately $120 million within 5 years. What kind of lifestyle does that level of wealth support? Cousin Michael asked. Dad's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Complete financial freedom. Private jets, luxury vacation properties, exclusive investment opportunities. The wealth advisors say we could easily support annual expenses of $2 to $3 million without touching the principal. He glanced at me meaningfully. That's roughly 70 times David's current salary, just in annual spending money. The investment opportunities at that wealth level become extraordinary, Mom added. Harold's advisors have mentioned private equity deals, venture capital funds, even opportunities to purchase entire companies. Dad nodded approvingly. When you have serious money, money makes money exponentially. The compound returns on a $75 million portfolio create wealth faster than most people can imagine. As the evening progressed, Dad continued detailing his investment successes, his relationship with elite wealth managers, and his family's trajectory toward even greater financial achievement. Every story somehow circled back to the impressive returns generated by his Meridian Elite Capital portfolio. The quarterly statements are absolutely remarkable, Dad said as Mom served dessert. Sometimes I show them to friends just to watch their reactions. Most people have never seen investment returns at this scale. After dinner, as family members gathered in the living room for coffee and conversation, Dad pulled out what appeared to be official-looking documents from his briefcase. I wanted to share something exciting with everyone, he announced. Meridian Elite Capital invited me to participate in their exclusive ultra-high net worth advisory council. He displayed what looked like an embossed certificate and several bound reports. They only extend invitations to clients with portfolios exceeding $50 million. It's essentially a private investment club where we collaborate on major financial strategies. Uncle Richard examined the documents with obvious admiration. This looks incredibly prestigious, Harold. The networking opportunities alone are worth millions, Dad explained. Last month's meeting included hedge fund managers, real estate moguls, technology entrepreneurs, even a few minor celebrities. He turned to address me directly. David, I know this kind of wealth seems impossible from your perspective, but I want you to understand that it's achievable with the right mindset and professional guidance. I appreciate the advice, I said politely. Dad's expression grew more serious. Son, I'm concerned about your long-term financial security. Community college teaching is essentially a dead-end career path. You're 32 years old with virtually no assets, no investment portfolio, no wealth-building strategy. Harold, Mom warned gently. No, this needs to be said, Dad continued. David is family and family takes care of each other. But there are limits to what we can do if he refuses to make intelligent financial decisions. He gestured around the beautifully appointed room. You'll never afford this lifestyle on a professor's salary, David. The sooner you accept that reality, the sooner you can start making better choices. Several family members nodded in agreement, though they looked uncomfortable with Dad's directness. Maybe David could transition into private sector work, Aunt Susan suggested diplomatically. Use his education background in corporate training or consulting. Excellent suggestion, Dad agreed enthusiastically. Corporate consulting can be quite lucrative. Much more realistic than pretending academic work will ever generate serious wealth. He pulled up another screen on his phone, apparently showing salary comparison data. Senior consultants at major firms earn $150,000 to $300,000 annually. Still nowhere near investment-level wealth, but at least it's respectable income. I'm content with teaching, I said calmly. Dad shook his head with obvious frustration. David, contentment is a luxury for people who can afford it. You're living paycheck to paycheck while convincing yourself that financial security doesn't matter. He stood up and walked to the window looking out at his landscaped grounds. This property, this lifestyle, this level of financial freedom, it's the result of making smart decisions consistently over many years. Working with professional wealth managers, taking calculated risks, prioritizing wealth building over personal satisfaction. Dad turned back to face me directly. You've chosen personal satisfaction over financial security, and that's fine. But don't pretend the consequences don't exist. You'll spend your entire life struggling with money while the rest of this family enjoys genuine prosperity. I understand your perspective, I replied quietly. I hope you do, Dad said. Because at some point the family can't keep subsidizing poor financial decisions. We love you, David, but we can't indefinitely support someone who refuses to help himself. The room fell silent. Mom looked mortified by Dad's bluntness, but several other family members nodded in agreement. Maybe we should change the subject, Mom suggested weakly. Actually, I think this conversation needed to happen, Dad replied. David needs to understand his position in this family's financial hierarchy. He returned to his seat and pulled up his portfolio app again. Meridian Elite Capital's wealth managers project my net worth will exceed $100 million within 3 years. David's net worth will probably never exceed $50,000. Those are just mathematical realities. As the evening wound down and family members began saying their goodbyes, Dad made a point of shaking hands with everyone and discussing their various business successes and investment strategies. When he reached me, his expression was a mixture of disappointment and resignation. David, I hope you'll consider what we discussed tonight. It's never too late to change course, but time is definitely working against you. I'll think about it, I said. Good. And remember, if you ever decide to get serious about wealth building, I'd be happy to introduce you to some entry-level financial advisors. Not Meridian Elite Capital, obviously, they don't work with small accounts, but there are firms that specialize in helping people with limited resources. I drove home to my modest apartment in a 20-year-old Honda Civic, listening to Dad's words echoing in my head. The contrast between his $75 million lifestyle and my community college professor existence couldn't have been more stark. After arriving home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at my computer. Dad's humiliation had been thorough and public, exactly as I'd expected. He'd been building toward this moment for months, gradually establishing himself as the family's financial success story while positioning me as the well-meaning but economically naive son who'd chosen passion over profit. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. David, I hope tonight's conversation didn't seem harsh. Sometimes tough love is necessary. You're intelligent enough to build real wealth if you're willing to make sacrifices. The choice is yours. I typed back simply, thanks for the advice. Then I opened my secure laptop and accessed my private investment management interface. Meridian Elite Capital appeared on the screen, not as Dad's wealth management firm, but as a subsidiary of my own investment holding company. I composed a brief message to my portfolio management team. Execute immediate liquidation of account H.Martinez 4471 effective at market open tomorrow. All positions should be closed and assets transferred to standard settlement procedures. Client notification per standard protocol. The message was delivered at 11:43 p.m. I reviewed the account details one final time. Harold Martinez, portfolio value $75,247,000, had been generating impressive returns for exactly 3 years and 4 months, the same duration as his most aggressive bragging phase about his investment success. At 7:15 a.m. the next morning, my phone started ringing. Dad's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 7:32. Then 7:58. By 9:45, I had 11 missed calls and 15 increasingly panicked text messages. The first voicemail was confused but controlled. David, something very strange is happening with my investment portfolio. Meridian Elite Capital is saying there's some kind of system error. Could you call me back when you get this? The second voicemail 20 minutes later was noticeably more agitated. David, I need you to call me immediately. Something's wrong with my accounts. The wealth managers are saying there's been some kind of liquidation, but that's impossible. I never authorized any transactions. By the third voicemail, Dad was clearly panicking. David, please call me right back. This is an emergency. My entire portfolio is gone. $75 million just disappeared overnight. I don't understand what's happening. The text messages showed a clear progression from confusion to desperation. David, call me, something's wrong with the investments. This is urgent, I need help understanding what happened. The wealth managers won't explain anything. David, please call me back, I'm scared. I think someone stole my money. $75 million is just gone. David, I don't know what to do. At 10:20 a.m. Mom called. David, honey, your father is having some kind of panic attack. Something terrible happened with his investments overnight. All his money disappeared. Do you know anything about financial law? Maybe there's someone you could call. I don't really understand sophisticated investment management, I replied honestly. He worked so hard building that portfolio. I can't understand how $75 million can just vanish without any explanation. At 11:45 a.m., Dad called again. This time I answered. David, he sobbed into the phone, his voice completely broken. Thank God you picked up. Something horrible happened. Someone stole my entire life savings. What do you mean stolen? I asked calmly. My investment portfolio, all $75 million, it's gone. Completely liquidated overnight. Meridian Elite Capital is saying I authorized the transactions, but that's impossible. I never signed anything authorizing a complete liquidation. I could hear him hyperventilating between sentences. Dad, slow down. What exactly did the wealth managers tell you? They said the account holder exercised a full liquidation clause. But David, I am the account holder. I never requested any liquidation. I don't even understand how someone could access my accounts without my authorization. That does sound unusual, I agreed. The customer service representatives keep saying the liquidation was authorized by the primary account administrator, but I don't know what that means. I thought I was the primary administrator. Dad was quiet for a moment, then continued in a smaller voice. David, I think this might be connected to identity theft. Someone must have stolen my personal information and convinced Meridian Elite Capital to liquidate my entire portfolio. Have you contacted the police? The wealth managers say it's not theft because the liquidation was authorized by someone with administrative access to my account. But David, I never gave anyone else access. I don't understand how this is possible. At 2:15 p.m. Uncle Richard called. David, your father called me crying. Apparently his investment portfolio disappeared overnight. He's talking about identity theft and fraud. Do you have any idea what might have happened? Dad knows much more about financial matters than I do, I said. This whole situation sounds extremely suspicious. Legitimate investment firms don't just liquidate $75 million without proper authorization procedures. At 3:30 p.m., my administrative assistant at Meridian Elite Capital called to confirm completion of the liquidation. All positions in account H. Martinez 4471 have been successfully liquidated, she reported. Total liquidation value was $75,247,832.17. All funds have been transferred to your primary holding account as requested. Any complications with the transaction? None. The account holder had signed standard administrative agreements when the account was established 3 years ago. The liquidation clause was clearly outlined in the original documentation. What about client notification? Mr. Martinez received automatic notifications at each stage of the liquidation process, as required by our standard procedures. He also has access to all original account agreements through our client portal. That evening, Dad called one final time. David, I need to ask you something and please don't take this personally. Okay. Last night at dinner when I was talking about lifestyle and financial security, you seemed, I don't know, unusually calm. Most people would have been angry or defensive when criticized so publicly. I wasn't angry, I said truthfully. But weren't you hurt? When I basically announced that you'd never achieve financial success or be able to afford a decent lifestyle. I considered this carefully. Dad, you were sharing your perspective based on your understanding of the situation. I can respect that. He was quiet for a long moment. David, do you think this could be some kind of cosmic justice? Like the universe punishing me for being cruel to you about money? I don't really believe in cosmic justice, I replied. Because if this is karma, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant to humiliate you. I was proud of what I'd accomplished, and I wanted you to understand the importance of financial planning. Dad, you don't need to apologize for being successful. But I wasn't actually successful, he cried. It was all fake. Someone was manipulating my accounts this whole time. They let me think I was a brilliant investor, then they took everything away just to destroy me. I'm sorry this happened to you. The worst part is facing everyone who heard me bragging last night. I have to explain that there never was a $75 million portfolio, that I'm not the financial genius I pretended to be. He started crying again. David, will you help me figure out what to do next? I know I said terrible things about your financial situation, but you're the only person I trust to give me honest advice. Of course I'll help however I can. Thank you. And David? I'm sorry I said you'd never afford a decent lifestyle. That was cruel and probably wrong. The next week, Dad met with several financial advisors and attorneys trying to understand what had happened to his investment portfolio. Eventually, someone explained that his original account agreements had included administrative clauses he'd apparently signed without fully understanding. The investigation revealed that Meridian Elite Capital was a legitimate investment firm, but Dad's specific account had been established under a structure that allowed for administrative liquidation without his direct authorization. The lawyers said everything was technically legal, though the account structure was unusual. Dad never recovered financially from the loss. He had to sell the house in Westchester and most of his possessions to cover debts he'd accumulated based on his assumed wealth. The family's lifestyle changed dramatically almost overnight. But he also became a more humble and thoughtful person. He stopped making comments about other people's financial situations and began expressing genuine appreciation for non-monetary forms of success. At our next family gathering held in Mom and Dad's much smaller apartment, Dad pulled me aside. David, I've been thinking about our conversation that night. About lifestyle and financial security. What about it? I realize now that I was measuring everything by the wrong standards. You chose work that gives you satisfaction and meaning. That's actually much more valuable than I understood. He looked around the modest apartment with something that might have been contentment. Maybe this is what I deserve. And maybe what you have is what actually matters. I never told Dad that I own Meridian Elite Capital, or that his investment portfolio had been funded by my own assets as an elaborate 3-year lesson in humility. Some truths are more valuable when they remain hidden. The $75 million returned to my primary investment fund, where it continued generating returns through legitimate business ventures and carefully managed portfolios. I kept working at the community college, living in my modest apartment and driving my 20-year-old Honda. Family gatherings became more meaningful after that. Less focus on money, more focus on relationships. Dad learned to measure success differently, and I learned that sometimes the most expensive gifts are the ones that teach people what truly matters.